Before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, a boy no older than 14 stood alone at the edge of a cracked sidewalk in a quiet Ohio town. His name was Eli Walker. He had sneakers that barely held together and a backpack that sagged like it carried the weight of more than just books. Most kids his age would have crossed the street to avoid the old motorcycle clubhouse that sat at the end of Rustwood Avenue. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it, Rustwood Brotherhood. Faded red brick, a giant steel door, and a rust-covered sign that didn't welcome visitors. But Eli wasn't most kids. He didn't flinch. He walked up to the open gate, eyes fixed on the row of motorcycles lined up like statues in the early morning light. Harley cruisers, custom choppers, dirt bikes with thick tires. They looked powerful, dangerous, alive. But what Eli saw wasn't the chrome or the leather. He saw opportunity. His voice, dry from a night without dinner, barely carried across the yard. "I just want to earn a sandwich," he said. Not a plea, not a whisper, just a quiet request wrapped in pride. Inside the clubhouse, a woman named Grace Thompson stood at the doorway, sipping her coffee and watching the boy from behind a screen of cigarette smoke. In her late 50s, Grace had a streak of gray through her black hair and a wit as sharp as her kitchen knives. She wore a denim vest over a faded t-shirt that read, "Feed people, not problems." Grace had seen her share of tough kids, lost kids, and kids who asked for handouts with eyes that had already given up. But this one didn't ask for anything free. He asked to work. That made her pause. Grace stepped out, leaned on the porch railing, and studied Eli with the practiced gaze of someone who had spent years behind a diner counter and even longer in a world where trust wasn't given lightly. "Wash what exactly?" she asked. Eli pointed to the motorcycles. "All of them," he said. "I'm careful. I won't mess them up." There was a short silence before Grace flicked her cigarette and disappeared around the back. A moment later, she returned with a bucket, 2 cloths, and a bottle of soap meant for chrome detailing. She handed it to him without another word. "Start with the 3 dirt bikes on the left. Do a good job, you eat. If not, you leave. Fair enough?" Eli nodded and clutched the bucket like it was made of gold. He moved with quiet focus, filling the bucket from a hose, adding soap, and dipping the rag. His hands worked slowly but precisely, scrubbing the wheels, the fenders, even the tight spots beneath the seats. He didn't rush. When he found dried mud, he soaked it first, then wiped it away until the metal shined. He looked like a boy trying to prove something, not just to the people watching, but maybe to himself. Meanwhile, Grace stepped into the kitchen, turned on the griddle, and began building something more than just lunch. She started with sourdough bread, thick slices toasted to a golden brown, then layered crisp bacon, juicy tomatoes, and fresh lettuce. She added extra fries on the side. It wasn't just a meal, it was a message. By the time she walked back outside, Eli had cleaned 2 bikes and was starting on the 3rd. One of the club members, a man named Logan with arms like steel beams, watched from a distance, arms crossed, but his expression had softened. Grace set the plate on a picnic table and called out, "Food's ready." Eli glanced up. His eyes widened. It was more than he expected. He approached slowly, as if unsure whether it was truly for him. "That's a lot," he said softly. "So was the work," Grace replied. "You earned it." Eli sat down and ate like someone who remembered what it meant to savor, not just the food, but the moment. When he was done, he got up without a word and returned to finish the job. By the 3rd morning, Eli returned before the sun did. The motorcycles still sat quietly in their rows, and the clubhouse smelled faintly of oil and black coffee. Grace had started calling him Grease Kid half-jokingly, and to her surprise, he didn't mind. He wore it like a badge of honor. What started as a simple trade, soap and labor for food, began to grow into something more. The members of the Rustwood Brotherhood, who once gave him cautious glances, now offered head nods or quiet words as they passed. He never asked for money. He just kept showing up, working harder than anyone expected a 14-year-old to work. One day, after finishing the last bike in the row, Eli noticed something strange. A vending machine near the garage entrance had a blinking screen and a loose front panel. Most people would have ignored it, but Eli squatted down, studied the wires behind the panel, and within minutes had it humming back to life. He didn't brag. He didn't wait for praise. He just stepped back and nodded to himself like he had fixed a faucet. Norman Briggs had been watching from the shadows. A retired Air Force technician and the quietest man in the club, Norman spent most of his time in the workshop behind the main garage, tinkering with electrical systems and salvaging bike parts. People often joked that he had more conversations with engines than humans, but Eli caught his eye. Norman walked over, curious. "You work with wiring before?" he asked. Eli shrugged. "Not really. Just makes sense. Some colors shouldn't touch." Norman didn't push. Instead, he handed Eli a wiring schematic for an old Harley. "What's this word say?" he asked, pointing to a label near the alternator. Eli hesitated. His finger hovered over the letters, tracing them one by one. He guessed. Wrong. Norman didn't react, just folded the page quietly and said, "Lights are out in the storage room. Think you can figure that out?" Eli looked up, searching for sarcasm. He found none. "Yeah," he said, "I can try." That afternoon, the lights came on. Norman found Eli sitting on a milk crate in the back corner of the storage room. In his hands was a comic book he'd pulled from a pile of old donations. He held it upside down. Norman didn't comment. He just sat beside him, opened a motorcycle repair manual with large print and clear pictures, and pointed to a word printed in bold. "This says carburetor. Can you find it again on the next page?" Eli stared, then slowly pointed to the matching word. Norman nodded. No lectures, no tests, just one word at a time, one page at a time. Over the next few weeks, they met like that, quietly, regularly. Norman brought books with photos. Eli brought questions. They practiced with comic strips, engine diagrams, and old road signs. Words started to connect. First the small ones, then the ones that mattered. Brake, piston, throttle. The kind of words that built confidence, not confusion. Then came the night Eli told Norman something he hadn't told anyone else. "Sometimes at home, the lights don't work," he said. "Mom says the bill's late again. I try to do schoolwork, but it's hard when it's dark." Norman nodded slowly. No pity in his face, just understanding. He'd seen it before in fellow veterans who came home to broken systems and broken promises. That night, he stayed up late, sketching out a plan. The next day, Norman cleared a space in the workshop. He pulled out a small solar panel, some LED strips, a rechargeable battery pack, and pieces salvaged from bikes long forgotten. Over the following evenings, other members joined in. Logan helped build the adjustable frame. Trey Dawson, the youngest in the club, donated a camping panel he never used. They soldered wires, checked voltages, and mounted switches. At the end of 3 days, they handed Eli a homemade, portable solar-powered study lamp. "Charge it during the day," Norman explained. "You'll get 4, maybe 5 hours of solid light at night." Eli didn't speak. He just stared at it, then at the men standing around him. Nobody had ever built anything for him before. That evening, Eli set up the lamp in the corner of the room he shared with his mother. There were storage bins and laundry baskets lining the wall, but now there was light. He opened his school folder, flipped to the first assignment, and began to read. Slowly, haltingly, but for the first time he didn't stop because of darkness. He kept going because he could. It was a Thursday afternoon when Norman found a folded envelope half sticking out of Eli's backpack. He hadn't been snooping. The boy had left the bag open on the workshop table while checking tire pressure on an old Triumph. But the envelope slipped out as Norman moved it aside. It was stamped with the local school district's logo in bold blue ink. Norman hesitated for a second, then picked it up. The words on the page made his heart sink. Final notice, attendance violations, academic probation, recommendation for removal. When Eli came back inside, Norman didn't raise his voice. He simply handed the letter over and waited. Eli's face went pale. He folded the paper quickly, stuffed it back in the envelope, and muttered, "It's nothing, I'm handling it." Norman's voice was calm but firm. "Handling what, exactly? You're about to get kicked out of school." Eli wouldn't meet his eyes. "I said I got it." But Norman could see the truth written across the boy's shoulders, the tight posture of someone who had learned to carry too much. He'd seen that same stance in young soldiers, proud and drowning at the same time. Later that evening, the letter sat on the clubhouse's wooden table, surrounded by cups of coffee, grease-stained hands, and serious faces. 7 members of the Rustwood Brotherhood had gathered after Norman called them in. Grace sat quietly, one hand wrapped around her mug, the other resting on a notepad. Logan read the letter aloud. 16 unexcused absences, 12 incomplete assignments, student placed on academic probation. He paused and looked up at Eli, who stood stiffly near the door, arms crossed like armor. "Why didn't you say anything?" Logan asked. Eli shrugged. "Because it's my problem. I don't need charity." Norman's voice was calm but firm. "Handling what, exactly? You're about to get kicked out of school." Eli wouldn't meet his eyes. "I said I got it." But Norman could see the truth written across the boy's shoulders, the tight posture of someone who had learned to carry too much. He'd seen that same stance in young soldiers, proud and drowning at the same time.
Grace stood slowly, setting down her cup. "This isn't charity," she said, her voice steady but full of heat. "This is family, and family doesn't let each other fail." Eli didn't speak. His throat was tight. No one had called him that before, not like that. Trey leaned forward, voice softer now. "Talk to us, man. What's actually going on?" Eli hesitated. Then the words came tumbling out, tangled and raw. "The power gets shut off sometimes, at home. I can't do homework in the dark. And when the lights come back, it's already late. I read slow. By the time I understand the assignment, it's already due. So I stopped trying." The room was quiet, not with judgment, but with understanding. Norman spoke next. "He's been working hard. His reading's improving. But the school doesn't see that. They just see the missing work." Logan leaned back, rubbing his chin. "What if we talk to them? The school, I mean. Explain what's going on." Eli shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "They're not going to listen to a motorcycle club." "Then we make them listen," Logan said. No one argued. 2 days later, Logan walked into Roosevelt Middle School wearing his full Rustwood Brotherhood vest, boots thudding across the linoleum floor. Parents stared. Teachers tightened their grips on coffee cups. The secretary behind the desk blinked twice. "Can I help you?" Logan nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. I'm here to see Principal O'Hara. It's about a student, Eli Walker." The principal's office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. Miss O'Hara was in her 50s, sharp glasses on a silver chain, the kind of woman who had seen everything and believed little of it. She didn't smile. "You're with that motorcycle group?" Logan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Rustwood Brotherhood. I'm here on behalf of Eli. Been working with him for a couple of months. He's turning things around." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Logan pulled out his phone and slid it across her desk. Photos of Eli washing bikes, learning to read, helping in the kitchen, wiring solar panels. "This kid shows up every day. He's learning responsibility. He's trying. He just needs someone to see that." Miss O'Hara looked at the images for a long moment. Then she looked at Logan, and something softened. "I've been in this district for over 20 years, she said. "Know how many parents actually show up for meetings like this?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Not enough. and never with someone in biker leather. Logan held her gaze. He's a good kid, ma'am. Just got dealt a bad hand. All we're asking for is a fair shot. She tapped her pen against her notebook, then opened Eli's file and scribbled a note. 6-month probation. He turns in every assignment, improves attendance and scores. We revisit after that. But one more violation, just one, and he's out. Agreed? Logan nodded. Understood. That evening, when Logan told Eli the news, the boy didn't cheer. He just nodded slowly, the weight of that second chance resting squarely on his shoulders. "Don't make me look stupid," Logan said with a grin. "I won't," Eli replied, and this time he meant it. By early spring, something about Eli had clearly changed. He still arrived at the Rustwood Brotherhood before sunrise, but his shoulders no longer curved inward the way they once had. He stood straighter now. He spoke a little louder, and when he laughed, it came easier. The 6 months of probation at school were well underway, and for the first time in his life, Eli was keeping up. Not perfectly, but honestly. Every assignment turned in, every absence explained, every evening spent under the steady glow of the solar lamp that had become his quiet companion. In the kitchen, Grace noticed the change before anyone else. Eli had always been careful with food, but now he was confident. He tasted as he cooked, adjusted seasoning without hesitation, and trusted his instincts. One afternoon, while prepping lunch for the club, Grace watched him work in silence. He diced onions evenly, flipped bacon at just the right moment, and leaned over the griddle to smell the air like a musician listening for pitch. "You've got a gift," she said finally. Eli shrugged. "I just pay attention."
A week later, Grace walked into the kitchen holding a folded flyer. It was for a regional junior cooking competition hosted by a nearby community college. Middle school students only, 1 entry per school. Grace set the flyer down in front of Eli. "You should enter," she said. Eli froze. "Me?" She nodded. "Yes, you. You understand flavor. That can't be taught." Eli shook his head slowly. "Those competitions are for kids with fancy tools, schools with money." Grace crossed her arms. "I've been cooking for over 30 years. Most people never learn what you already have. Instinct, respect for ingredients, courage. That matters more than equipment." The idea terrified him, but curiosity pushed back against the fear. That night, Eli stayed late, experimenting quietly after everyone else had gone home. He started with the first meal Grace had ever made him, a simple bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. Then he began to build on it. He created a smoky chipotle sauce from scratch, tested different bacon seasonings until he found the right balance of heat and sweetness, and turned Grace's secret spice blend into a rich tomato jam that added depth to every bite. When he finally presented the finished sandwich to the club, silence fell. Logan took the first bite, then another. "That's not just good," he said. "That's special." They named it together, Rustwood Fire BLT. Eli insisted it was too much. The club insisted harder. On the morning of the competition, Eli's hands shook as he stood in the industrial kitchen of the community college. Around him were students with custom knife sets, polished aprons, and ingredients packed in labeled containers. One competitor wheeled in equipment that looked more expensive than Eli's entire kitchen setup. Eli had a borrowed knife from Grace, a cast-iron pan he insisted on bringing, and a cooler with ingredients he had measured twice the night before. Norman stood beside him and spoke quietly. "Tools don't make the cook. What you do with what you've got does." When the competition began, Eli focused on his station. He cooked slowly, deliberately. Bacon rendered until crisp but tender. Sauce whisked smooth. Bread toasted in the cast iron until it carried just enough char. When he plated the sandwich, he kept it simple. Diagonal cut, small side of tomato jam, fresh herbs for balance, no tricks, just care. As the judges moved down the line, Eli explained his dish in a steady voice. "This sandwich is about dignity," he said. "It's made from simple ingredients, but it respects every step. It's inspired by people who taught me that earning your place matters." One judge, a chef from a downtown restaurant, paused mid-bite. "How long have you been cooking?" he asked. "About 6 months," Eli replied, "at a motorcycle clubhouse." The judges exchanged glances. When the winners were announced, Eli barely heard his name. Second place, Rustwood Fire BLT. The applause washed over him. In the audience, Grace wiped her eyes. Norman clapped once, firm and proud. Logan cheered loud enough for all of them. At the awards dinner, Eli stepped up to the microphone holding a small trophy shaped like a chef's hat. His voice wavered at first, then steadied. "I don't come from a culinary school," he said. "I came from a garage where people gave me a chance to work. They taught me how to read, how to cook, and how to stand up straight. This sandwich started as a meal. It became a second chance." For Eli, the competition wasn't about winning, it was proof. Proof that the boy who once asked for a sandwich had earned something far bigger. These days, Eli is 15. His 6-month probation ended with no violations, and the school offered to wipe it clean from his record. But Eli shook his head. "I earned that second chance," he told Principal O'Hara. "I want to remember what it cost." He still shows up at Rustwood Brotherhood before school, not to wash bikes anymore, but to help Grace prep breakfast for the club. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, he runs the grill for community dinners. His name is stitched in silver thread across a black apron that hangs beside Grace's in the kitchen. Rustwood's assistant chef. But no one really calls him that. Around the club, he's still just Grease. The solar lamp that lit his first homework sessions still sits on his nightstand. The old folders Norman built for him are a little worn now, but still in use. His reading has come far. He can get through most assignments on his own, and twice a week he still meets Norman in the garage. They've moved past comic books now. Adventure novels, short stories, even cookbooks with longer instructions. Norman says they're building more than vocabulary. They're building habits. And Eli, without realizing it, is now helping other kids who struggle with reading, too. On Thursday afternoons, the back workshop becomes a quiet space where Eli reads aloud to a group of younger kids, most of whom remind him of himself a year ago. The patch on his vest, hand-stitched by Norman, says earned, not given. To anyone else, it might look like just fabric, but to Eli, it's a promise he keeps every day. That dignity isn't something someone hands you, it's something you step into, slowly, one right choice at a time. Logan often jokes that no one ever expects a motorcycle club to be in the business of changing lives. Grace just smiles when people say that. "We don't change lives," she says. "We hold the door open. They do the walking." And Eli? He walks with purpose now. Not fast, not loud, but steady. He keeps extra ingredients in the pantry just in case another kid comes around needing to earn a sandwich, because he remembers what it felt like to be hungry, to feel invisible, to believe you had to prove your worth just to be fed.
Sometimes, when the garage is quiet and the club is settling in for the night, Grace will find Eli cleaning up the kitchen, humming under his breath. She'll pour them both a cup of tea and sit with him for a while, watching the stars through the window. No big speeches, just presence. Eli still doesn't talk much about where he came from, but he talks a lot about where he's going. He wants to open a small diner someday. Nothing fancy, just honest food, a quiet place, and a kitchen that always has room for one more. Maybe that's what this story is really about. Not rescue, not pity, just a sandwich, a job, a little trust, and people willing to say, "We see you. You matter. Let's get to work." So if you've ever wondered whether a simple act of kindness could really change someone's life, remember this. All he asked for was a sandwich. What he got was a future.